We first broke the story about dog testing at Mcguire VA Medical Center here in Richmond back in March. And tonight, we hear from whistleblowers sharing inside knowledge about medical experiments involving dogs.
These are experiments that your taxes are funding. Our 8 News investigator Carrie O'Brien has a view from the inside. It's an 8 News exclusive.
For the first time, we have photos of the dogs. This image and others sent to us by the whistleblower and a union rep for the federal employees there at Mcguire VA Hospital. They say they're speaking out because they can no longer sit silent and watch these animals suffer.
You could see the incisions and the stitches and stuff on it and the shaved part, and that one was very, very distraught.
Dogs post-surgery, shaved, stitched, and locked in cages for most of the day. Todd Wiesner, who works at Mcguire VA Medical Center, was so disturbed by what he saw on his service calls to the research lab.
To see dogs that distraught, it's hard.
He reached out to his union representative, and he wasn't the only one.
Several of the employees had come to me with concerns about the animals' conditions. They were seeing them in pain, distress.
Jennifer Marshall, president of the American Federation of Government Employees, Local 2145, advised Wiesner and others to take photos. These images of the dogs in operating rooms were taken in late May, but Wiesner and Marshall tell us the deadly experiments are still going on. Wiesner says seeing these dogs cut, probed, and then confined to a small kennel or laboratory is heartbreaking.
You can tell they're like scared of you or nervous, very distraught, uncomfortable.
Does it seem like they're in pain?
Some of them, yes.
Records show the Mcguire research is centered around treating heart disease, particularly patients suffering from an irregular heartbeat or diabetes. The experiments currently involve 118 dogs and include surgeries to implant pacemakers, stress tests, and induced heart attacks. Most, if not all, of the dogs are set to die at the end of the project. In some cases, the hearts are harvested.
Have you ever seen anything like that?
Yes, I have seen a bowl with a harvested dog heart.
We're told since 8 News started exposing the experiments, security around the lab has been tightened, the windows covered up.
They've been blackened out.
Wiesner, a veteran himself who served in Iraq, has filed complaints with the Department of Veteran Affairs Office of Inspector General and Special Counsel.
I don't think it's the VA's job to be doing this to dogs when they should be focusing on taking care of veterans.
Marshall agrees. She tells us the research labs for the dog testing takes up part of 2 floors.
I have nurse practitioners that don't have an office space. I've got social workers that are tripping over each other.
It's space and taxpayer dollars she believes could be put to better use.
They could take the entire 3rd floor, which is huge square footage, get research out of there and utilize that for patient care. The mission of the medical center is to provide care for our veterans.
The VA says canine research is essential to developing crucial medical advancements to help veterans and non-veterans alike. The VA adds its research has resulted in life-saving innovations like the cardiac pacemaker, the first liver transplant, and the nicotine patch. But this insider calls it cruel.
I can't see how anybody that sees those dogs and the way they look at you, and then, like I said, the look in their eyes that they're nervous, they don't know what's going on, they're innocent, God's creatures.
8 News did reach out to Mcguire. Officials declined to go on camera. The Department of Veteran Affairs office in D.C. tells 8 News the VA will continue conducting animal research like someone's life depends on it, because it does. Meanwhile, Congressman Dave Bratt from Virginia has introduced the Puppers Act. It's a bill that would limit the use of dogs in animal testing. Carrie O'Brien, 8 News.
Reaction today from the VA and lawmakers after the House votes to ban medical testing on dogs at veterans hospitals. It's funded in part with your taxpayer money.
8 News investigator Carrie O'Brien first exposed those deadly dog experiments at Mcguire. She joins us now with the latest developments. Carrie?
Juan, Christina, several lawmakers have told us they had no idea the VA was even using dogs in research until they saw our reports. And they tell us they believe this research money could be better spent on caring for our veterans.
In short, my amendment will stop funding for painful dog experiments at the VA.
Virginia Representative Dave Bratt on the House floor making his case for defunding deadly dog experiments at VA hospitals like Mcguire. His amendment to the federal defense spending bill,
Those in favor say aye.
passes unanimously.
The ayes have it.
The bill puts in a clear limit, no causing pain and suffering to animals.
The move comes just 2 days after Mcguire whistleblowers shared inside knowledge with 8 News of the dog testing.
You can tell they're like scared of you or nervous, very distraught, uncomfortable.
Records show the Mcguire research is centered around treating heart disease. As part of the dog testing, the canines undergo surgeries and are implanted with pacemakers. They are then forced to run on treadmills until they collapse or suffer a heart attack. Most of the dogs are killed.
They're actually torturing these dogs.
But the VA's chief veterinarian, Dr. Michael Fallon, tells 8 News in a statement today, if efforts to stop animal research are successful, it also puts a stop to advances that could save or change the lives of our veterans and the nation as a whole. Congressman Bratt sees it differently.
I think they can find less invasive ways of doing this research.
It is important to note the House amendment is only good for 1 year and only cuts federal funding for the research. 8 News has exposed some of the money for the dog experiments at Mcguire comes from the American Heart Association. 8 News reached out to see if the association will continue to support the deadly dog tests. A spokesperson tells us their current research agreement with Mcguire funds the research through June of 2019. But in a statement, they tell us in part, the American Heart Association's research committee will monitor the legislative situation and discuss any implications for our research funding program in the future.
The spending bill still needs to be taken up by the Senate. Meanwhile, Congressman Bratt says he will still be pushing for his Puppers Act, which would prohibit the Department of Veteran Affairs from using dogs in painful research projects. Juan?
Our 8 News investigator Carrie O'Brien was first to expose your taxpayer money was funding the canine research.
And in this 8 News exclusive, she's sitting down one-on-one with the VA's chief veterinary medical officer.
Dr. Michael Fallon flew in from Atlanta to talk to us about those controversial dog experiments. And tonight we are learning new information about where the dogs come from, how long the project has been underway, and why the VA uses canines in medical research. The VA has maintained that this is vital research. Why?
It's important for our veterans to receive the very best health care they can.
Dr. Michael Fallon, the Department of Veterans Affairs Chief Veterinary Medical Officer, defends the use of dogs in medical research at the VA. He says sometimes there's no other option.
We can't rely on computer simulations. We don't know enough about the human body.
Reoccurring comment I hear from the public is, I just don't want my tax dollars to be going towards killing dogs. How would you respond to those folks?
I would respond to that by saying that we don't want to have to be using dogs in research, but there's no alternative. There are very specific research projects that require dogs.
Projects like the work at Mcguire studying heart disease, says Dr. Fallon. Documents reviewed by 8 News show dogs undergo chest surgery, are implanted with pacemakers, and then run on treadmills.
The dogs enjoy being on the treadmill. They look forward to it.
Yet the research plans indicate some dogs may collapse and suffer a heart attack. Fallon told us that's a worst-case scenario.
The dogs could collapse, but they don't want the dogs to collapse. As soon as the dogs experience any discomfort, it's stopped.
They were seeing them in pain, distress.
Mcguire insiders recently told 8 News the dogs are in pain, caged, and nervous.
To see dogs that distraught, it's hard.
What's your reaction to that?
That's simply not true. I've seen these dogs myself. The dogs were very healthy.
He says the dogs are exercised daily, but admits most are euthanized.
These dogs are purpose-bred for research, so they've never been pets.
For the first time since we started asking questions in March, we are learning the dog testing at Mcguire has been ongoing for 3 years. The chief vet says 39 canines have been experimented on. Researchers have been approved to use up to 118 dogs. Fallon says they're all adult dogs.
We are not using any puppies.
However, we point out to him the project plans call for puppies as young as 6 months.
I would have to look at that data again.
The VA has stressed dog research has led to medical breakthroughs like the cardiac pacemaker, the first liver transplant, and the nicotine patch. All inventions more than 30 years old. So with Dr. Fallon here, we wanted to know, what has the work at Mcguire over the past 3 years led to?
Anything current that has come out of these projects here at Mcguire?
So the nature of research is that you rarely see the fruits of the research immediately.
But the chief vet says dog research in LA recently led to the development of the implantable insulin pump.
We can't really tell which project is going to provide that clinical breakthrough, but if we don't do the projects, then we know we're not going to have a clinical breakthrough.
What about critics who say, I think the VA should get back to focusing simply on veterans and patient care and maybe not so much research?
I would say that research is absolutely part of modern healthcare. You cannot separate the two.
House lawmakers recently voted to cut funding for VA research involving dogs. Dr. Fallon says that would be devastating for veterans. He says the research would come to a halt. Now you can watch our entire unedited version of this interview online on our website, WRIC.com.
Tonight, protesters rally outside Mcguire VA Medical Center demanding the hospital stop using dogs in deadly medical research. Meanwhile, a national veterans organization is supporting the animal experiments. 8 News investigator Carrie O'Brien has details.
This group of protesters out here holding signs that read Mcguire, killing dogs. And man's best friend is not a specimen. They're fighting to stop the dog research here at Mcguire, and they want to adopt these dogs.
We have a list of people who already want to adopt these dogs. I mean, we're outraged.
Philip Ramirez founded the Guardians of Animal Welfare after learning the VA was using dogs in medical research.
It needs to stop today in 2017, and we're asking Mcguire to turn these dogs over to us.
The experiments at Mcguire examine heart disease in humans. As part of the testing, the dogs undergo chest surgery, are implanted with pacemakers, and run on treadmills. At the end of the testing, all of the dogs, some puppies, according to the research records, are euthanized.
Euthanize is not the right word. That's a mercy killing. This could be healthy animals that are exterminated.
The number one cause of death around the globe is heart disease and stroke.
But Sherman Gilliams Jr., the executive director for the Paralyzed Veterans of America, says the dog research could lead to medical breakthroughs that could advance the lives of veterans.
Paraplegics are likely to die from heart disease more than any other cause. Amputees are likely to incur some form of cardiovascular disease, including diabetes.
The Paralyzed Veterans of America is one of dozens of service and medical groups that recently fired off this letter to the House Committee on Appropriations, arguing animal models play an essential role in advancing our understanding of human health and disease. The House recently voted unanimously to defund dog research at the VA.
It happened by voice vote. No debate, no regard for what stakeholders might feel about this.
So what would you say to those folks and our viewers who say, I don't want my tax money going to kill dogs?
Let's talk about the trade-off, and then we can have an honest conversation about where we go from there.
Still, these protesters believe there are alternatives to this kind of research, and they don't plan to go away.
Please get involved, make telephone calls, help us to stop this.
Now, the Senate still needs to vote on that measure that would cut funding for research involving dogs at the VA. Stay with 8 News for updates. In Richmond, Carrie O'Brien, 8 News.
8 News uncovers your state tax dollars have been funding those deadly dog experiments at Mcguire VA Hospital. Our 8 News investigator Carrie O'Brien has been following the money trail and has this 8 News exclusive.
We've known for months that federal taxpayer money supports this medical research at the Veterans Hospital. But now we've confirmed Virginia has funded the canine experiments, and it has some lawmakers calling for an end to the contributions.
Once hidden, now revealed. The Commonwealth of Virginia listed as a funding source for Mcguire Medical Center's dog experiments. This information had originally been redacted in research documents obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request. The recent disclosure, an early victory for the taxpayer watchdog group White Coat Waste Project, which slapped the Department of Veterans Affairs with a lawsuit alleging the federal agency was hiding this public information.
We cannot do this. We just can't.
On the phone with us from Franklin County, Senator Bill Stanley, stunned and appalled. The experiments have involved at least 39 dogs, surgically implanted with pacemakers and run on treadmills as part of a study into heart disease. All of the dogs are euthanized.
I was truly shocked when I learned that state funds, state taxpayer money is going to the cruel and inhumane treatment of dogs, all in the name of science.
8 News did some further digging and confirmed each year lawmakers allocate money from Virginia's general fund to the Center for Innovative Technology. It's an agency of the Commonwealth. CIT then decides what research projects get funded. And in 2016, CIT awarded Mcguire and Dr. Alex Tan nearly $100,000 for the dog research. Tan is the same doctor 8 News found a review committee called, quote, reckless and responsible for several botched surgeries resulting in dog deaths. We shared what we found with lawmakers. Stanley says he had no idea that this block grant was being used to conduct deadly testing on dogs.
We can find better ways in 2017 to find the information that they need to make our lives of our veterans and other people better.
The VA says dogs are only used in studies when rodents can't provide the information needed. Other supporters say canine research has and can lead to future medical breakthroughs.
The chance we're taking, though, by stopping animal research is you will in fact impact our ability to find new treatments for not just human beings, but for animals.
Still, Senator Stanley and Richmond Senator Glenn Sturtevant have fired off this letter to the governor expressing opposition to the Commonwealth's role in the funding, calling it abusive and wasteful. They demand to know in total how much taxpayer money has been provided for the research and what action has the Commonwealth taken to address violations at Mcguire, like those botched surgeries.
Senator Stanley tells 8 News he has already drafted legislation that would ban Virginia tax money for any research projects that harm dogs. Back to you. Lawmakers have introduced a bill that would prohibit state funds for medical research that harms dogs or cats. The legislation was prompted by a series of 8 News investigations. We exposed deadly dog experiments at Mcguire VA Hospital here in Richmond. Some lawmakers told us they were shocked when they learned, and 8 News and uncovered, that the Commonwealth of Virginia was listed as a funding source for the experiments. And now they're moving forward with plans to put an end to it.
I think most Virginians would tell you that they don't want their taxpayer dollars going to fund these sorts of maximum pain experiments.
The legislation introduced by Senators Glenn Sturtevant and Bill Stanley bans state taxpayer money for any public or private scientific research that causes significant pain to a dog or cat.
A lot of people are just totally unaware of that some areas of the medical community are performing these maximum pain experiments on dogs and sometimes on puppies that are as young as 6 months.
The Republicans say they introduced the legislation after 8 News exposed Virginia was partly providing the financial support for the deadly dog research at Mcguire Medical Center.
We've heard from your reporting about botched surgeries that have resulted in the deaths of dogs.
VA research records show the experiments in Richmond have involved at least 39 dogs, surgically implanted with pacemakers and run on treadmills, until some have a heart attack. It's part of a study into cardiovascular disease. All of the dogs are eventually euthanized. Mcguire whistleblowers called it animal abuse.
You can tell they're like scared of you or nervous, very distraught, uncomfortable.
The VA says dogs are only used in research when rodents can't provide the information needed. And the VA tells us the research has the support of major veterans groups like the Paralyzed Veterans of America and the American Legion because it creates the potential for life-changing medical breakthroughs for seriously disabled veterans.
I think it's important for a lot of people to understand that there's nothing wrong with these dogs before they start to undergo the experiments.
The lawmakers also plan to take this one step further and introduce legislation that would ban any sort of testing that harms dogs and cats in Virginia, no matter who funds it.